Well, welcome everybody. I'm seeing a lot of folks enter the room here at 2 o'clock high. We've got a great webinar for everyone today, focused on the engaging Gen Z. Every day we need to learn a little bit more about this generation, and we've got amazing 3 experts here that I partnered with, at least Dorinda, Byers and Associates, over the last half a dozen years, and she really is out there making a difference in the workforce and economic development world that we all live in. So welcome. NCATC, for those of you who don't know, I think most of you do, that I see your names on the screen, are been around for 36 years, and we focus on workforce and economic development, specifically in advanced technology and manufacturing across the country, with about 170 colleges and 50 corporate strategic partners. But we do webinars with our strategic partners each quarter, and we're thrilled that Dorinda, Byers and Associates is leading this one today with the Supply Chain Automation Hub, and she'll talk a little bit more about that as we move forward. All of you are muted, and please stay that way until we get through the presentation, and there'll be at least 15 minutes set aside for Q&A. If you have questions along the way, please put it in chat. And we are recording this for prosperity, so that we can post it on our website in the near future, and also share it throughout all of your networks that you'd care to share it with. So I just wanted to let everybody know that that's the game plan today. Dorinda, without any further ado, you've worked on Dorinda D. Byers and Associates for almost 10 years now, and you're in business development for the state of Ohio, and you've done a lot of other things around that. So I'll let everybody know a little bit more about you from your viewpoint, and I'll turn my mic off and introduce you, Dorinda Byers.
Thank you, Craig. Craig and Holly, we really appreciate the opportunity to be back here with NCATC today. I am delighted to have Kim and Cori with me. I have been fortunate with D. Byers and Associates to get to work with them on the Supply Chain Automation Workforce Hub for MSG, and we are thrilled to be presenting to you today a little bit about Gen Z, that generation that everybody seems to be very interested in. So we're hoping today to give you some tools and strategies to be able to better engage them. So thanks again for being here. So myself, Kim, and Cori, again, are representing Manhattan Strategy Group today, and we'd like to get to know you a little. It is spring, so in the chat, if you would like, put your name, role, organization, your perception of Gen Z in one word, and something you're looking forward to this spring. We'd love to get to know you. As for me, my perception of Gen Z in one word at this point is kind of turmoil, and one thing I'm looking forward to this spring is just being outside. I love to be outside. So our agenda for today, we're going to talk a little bit about who Gen Z is, Gen Z in the workplace, and then specific strategies around how we're going to mentor Gen Z. First, though, a little about our Supply Chain Automation Workforce Hub that Kim, Cori, and myself are working on. We are one of the Department of Labor intermediaries for apprenticeship. So we're working on things like how we scale up apprenticeship all around the country. We're looking at things like what we're doing today with outreach and education regarding apprenticeships. We also help a lot with standards development and registration of those apprenticeships. We do have some ability to help look for funding opportunities. And then we also have, on a first come, first served basis, some of our own incentive funding that we can offer to help as new apprenticeships are being stood up around the country. And we can also help kind of modify or expand existing apprenticeship programs. Some of the different things that we do, partnering with employers. We just got back from New Mexico. We had a brand new apprenticeship program stood up out there with Mansco. It's one of the first ever for the state of New Mexico. So that's an example of us partnering with an employer to kind of get that registered apprenticeship program stood up. We're also really helping workforce organizations make those connections to employers, connecting to those partners. If we have an employer who needs help kind of putting together some of that related technical instruction, we want to be looking to folks like NCATC institutions to help us with that. We're also looking at those who might want to become a sponsor. We talked recently to an Ohio institution who wants to become an apprenticeship sponsor. So just helping kind of figure out the lay of the land and what some of the responsibilities are for a partner and a sponsor. We also help with some of that curriculum development piece. Now we're going to talk a little about who is Gen Z, exploring some of their identity and values. I was actually yesterday on site with a group of Gen Z students for another project that we're working on and was talking a little bit with them. And they warned me that they have about a 30-second attention span. So they wanted me to be aware of that. And they also wanted me to be aware that because of that attention span, they feel like the personal contact is more important than ever to them. They really need those personal connections because they have spent so much time in front of screens. That was one of the things that they really wanted to convey to me yesterday. So it's one of the first generations ever in the digital age. They've also experienced many major global events like the 2008 recession. We're starting to have a big population growth of Gen Z. They're becoming one of the larger generations, particularly one of the larger generations in the workplace. High school graduation rates are increasing, and they're also very civically engaged. Some other things about Gen Z in terms of the workplace. As I mentioned, that percentage in the workforce is growing. Half of the respondents to this poll, when they talk to Gen Z, have actually used AI to aid their work, but only 35% said some of their organizations have AI policies, so something to think about. Gen Z does feel more comfortable talking about traditionally sensitive topics like job satisfaction and compensation. So that's a little different maybe than some other generations like mine of Gen X. They also feel employers need to be involved with kind of some social issues. They feel that they're ready to be leaders. One of their goals is to become executive decision makers, executive level. They're also thinking about starting their own businesses. Notice this one of 83% that we have. 83% say a workplace mentor is crucial for their career, but only 52% of workers report having that mentor. They know that professional success is not done alone. They really want to give that feedback and help their peers. And by the way, they also expect that feedback to be given to them on a regular basis. And then finally, 52% say they will leave a job if they're unable to get along with their managers. So that manager and that frontline supervisor role being very critical. Some quotes from Gen Z. I mentioned my experience yesterday. A couple of these I really like. Give more beginners a chance. Again, I certainly heard this yesterday. Many of these students were seniors in college, and so they're kind of embarking on a job search, and they felt like that's been really challenging for them. You know, putting in lots of applications, not necessarily hearing back. And they felt like they need a better chance to be able to showcase some of their experiences and some of the work that they've done as part of that job application process. They also want to work for a purpose, that quote down in the bottom left-hand corner. They want to make a real difference in the world. And they're also not necessarily believing in expertise. And again, they talked about this yesterday. TikTok influencers are their friends because they're already seeing, you know, folks out there on TikTok. So that's really important to them. And they also want to realize that not every generation, not every member of that generation is cookie cutter. So there are unique pieces to that generation and understand that each one of them is an individual. So what are some expectations and challenges regarding Gen Z in the workplace? Well, burnout. So they're really facing burnout and they're dealing with a lot of mental health issues. They really advocate for mental health, but struggle to separate those emotions. The different communication styles, I've recently been talking with and working with some manufacturers, and this is certainly something they've highlighted. They had that multi-generational workplace, and one manufacturer I was talking with recently was talking to me about the struggles between those various generations. They have 6 generations in their workplace, and they were talking about how Gen Z sometimes just wants to jump onto Teams and, you know, type a message, whereas others that are of different generations want to actually talk, you know, face to face or have a phone conversation. So some of those different communication styles and being able to bridge those can be important. The feedback vacuum, they really want that frequent feedback, but what we're hearing from employers and kind of seeing in the literature is that they often lack some of those soft skills, some of those self-management skills. Sometimes they also can have misaligned values. They want flexibility and employer-centeredness, which can be very different from what an employer is seeking. And they also really want job fulfillment and job security, but they know that there's a chance for layoffs and insecurity out there. So there are kind of some also disconnects there. And then I think the other piece to note here is 18% of US managers have considered quitting due to the stress of managing Gen Z workers. And again, I've certainly heard a lot about that, not only from those managing them, but also there's a lot of complaints about them from their peers, you know, of different generations and working with them. So how can we kind of work on building that inclusive multi-generational workplace? Well, I think one of the things we're going to talk about today, mentoring and apprenticeship, is certainly a great way to encourage some of that sharing of knowledge between those different generations and kind of bring them together. Leveraging technology as a great connector, being able to use, things like Teams to try to better connect workplaces. Aligning on purpose and values, really helping everyone kind of have that common value, that common purpose that we're looking for at the workplace. Customizing some of those engagement strategies and really looking at what the differences are between various generations that we see down in that bottom corner and how we kind of marry those up. Making sure all employees feel valued and empowered. We've recently seen some research coming out from Gallup about just how much disengagement there is in the workplace, and it's kind of alarming. Redesigning those career paths. One of the things we hear and see a lot from Gen Z is they're really looking for that career path. They want to walk into an organization and understand what that process looks like to advance. So those organizations who have that process and that pathway laid out very clearly are going to be a little bit more successful with Gen Z. And then finally, integrating that intergenerational perspective that we talked about. So really cultivating opportunities for those generations to learn from one another and to grow and work better together. Some of their priorities, and I think this one is interesting. When we think about apprenticeship and we also think about mentoring, that learning and development piece that we see up top is very important to them, that second bullet point. They're really looking for those opportunities to learn. And also going along with that, they're looking for those opportunities to progress and advance in their career. Some reasons that they left their organization. We heard last slide about how they're really looking for that purpose. We see that some of them did not find that work to be fulfilling or meaningful. They also did not necessarily see that career advancement opportunity and the learning and development opportunities. So looking at that, and then we see that emphasis on flexible hours and that emphasis on that positive work-life balance that they're looking for. Some strategies for developing emerging leaders, recognizing the value and some of the unique strengths that they can bring to the workplace. One of the things I found as I worked with this group of students on another project that we have where they were kind of developing a marketing and outreach strategy was they were very creative. They were very innovative and they didn't necessarily have those barriers. So I think that's just one of the strengths that they can bring. Focusing on that long-term development and how we really help them develop those skills to do things like lead, influence, coach others, etc. Using some of those projects, perhaps it's volunteer opportunities or other stretch projects to help them build some experience. And then that last one, something we're going to emphasize today that Kim and Cori are going to get into, that implementing those mentorship programs because they're very hungry for that feedback and those opportunities to learn. Mentorship in the era of Gen Z, and then we're going to get ready to turn over to Kim and Cori to hear more about this. They like some mentors who really want to embrace that technology, and that was one of the things they talked about with me again yesterday. They didn't necessarily expect me to be an expert, but that I was at least aware of the platforms and willing to learn more about the platforms that they were on. They're also looking for those holistic connections. They want the employer and the mentor to understand that they have a life outside of work. So they're really looking for a chance to kind of embed and get feedback on some of those life decisions as well, not just work. They really want kind of that two-way street. One of the things they emphasized to me yesterday was authenticity. They want to know that I made mistakes as a mentor. They don't want to just hear about everything that was perfect with me. They want to know about those mistakes also and how I learned from those as well. And then also really building those personal connections, embracing those career paths, and being able to be flexible. Gen Z is a little bit nervous about where AI is going to go and how that's going to affect their career. So us being able to kind of understand some of that and help them prepare for how they're going to pivot as a mentor is also important. And with that, we're going to be turning it over to Cori, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about some of the key elements of mentorship. So Cori, take it away.
So much, Dorinda. Very much appreciate that. Before I even start, I will share something, a bit of personal happiness, if you will, for me. I am a small business owner like Dorinda, and I work from my little office at home, of course, much of the time. Today, as it happens, I am out and about in the real world, and thanks very much to the Pacer Center here in Minneapolis for hosting me. But what makes me particularly excited about that is that I do not have to spend this entire webinar reminding myself, Cori, for heaven's sakes, don't stand up, because you'll at least cost yourself your credibility when folks see that you only got half dressed. You might even cost yourself your career. So I wanted to share that. I'm just really excited about it. It's just a huge thing I no longer have to think about. And I should have checked with you, Dorinda. I don't know if I have slide control, but if you can jump us to the next slide here. Great, thank you. So this is great, and we've got I've got to credit Dr. Harris. I've got to credit Kim for this. This is one of her wonderful visuals that just brings together so many ideas. And we see really what we want to see in mentorship. Of course, it all begins with active engagement. But it involves, as Dorinda was talking about, we want an authentic process here. A mentor is not, we don't put mentors with Gen Z or with anyone else, by the way, with the thought that, okay, Cori's going to go be a mentor and he's going to talk about he's perfect and there's never been a challenge. Everything is just right. He never struggles with anything. He's just going to model this kind of bizarre notion of a perfect professional. Absolutely not. We want real people being mentors who have had real challenges and have overcome those challenges and continue to have them. We don't want mentors saying that, well, yeah, if you just do X, Y, and Z, then your problems will be over. Then the challenges will be over. Challenges will continue throughout our career. We know that. And that authenticity is so important to have here. Flexibility, of course, which goes right along with adaptability. We want both mentors and a mentorship process that is able to move to move as it needs to do to meet the needs of participants, to meet the needs of organizations, and that is going to adapt as things change. I mean, this is yet another cornerstone of what we think about when we think about Gen Z. This is a group of folks that are used to change and perhaps are used to so much change that they don't even perceive it as change anymore, just this constant adaptability of all aspects of their life. So of course, this process has to be that too. And there also is room, by the way, this is not one directional either in any of these things. We want our mentees to be adaptable and flexible, and we want them to be developing those skills as we're going through this. Of course, accessible to all, but that again is both the program itself and any individual mentorship relationship should be fully accessible. Of course, we want holistic guidance. We're going to talk about that, open communication and role modeling. And we can actually jump to the next slide, and then I think almost immediately to the one after that. Yeah. So what we want to talk about now is goals. Right. Perfect. Thank you, Dorinda. And really, we talk about goals. We can think about individual goals, but the first thing we have to consider for ourselves is what are the fundamental goals of this program for us? If we are building this mentorship program here at this company, here with this employer, what are they trying to accomplish? Is it, as I sat down at the hotel last night to have dinner, and it was kind of crowded, so I sat right next to someone, and we had the obligatory quick conversation, and I said, so what do you do? And she said, oh, I'm an HR manager. And I don't think she'd ever seen someone's face light up like mine did when I said, oh, HR manager, that's good. And so I told her what we're talking about today. And she said one of her major observations, and this is reflected in what we just heard Dorinda talking about, was just the sense of disconnect, right? That the some of the older generations in the workplace really were not comfortable with Gen Z, felt that they just had a totally different perspective. And Gen Z felt very much the same way. So is a goal of this relationship simply to build some connections and get us to say, oh, wow, maybe Kim and Cori are not absolutely totally different. Maybe if they talk for 5 minutes, they'll realize, oh, we have a lot more in common than we thought we did. But once we've arrived at what those goals are, what is our vision for what we want this to accomplish in this organization? We need to communicate that, right? That needs to come through in workshops. We need to be training on that. We need to have written literature about that. We need to have stuff on our website about that. We need to be clear for expectations. What are our expectations for our mentor? What is the timing of this going to be? Is it going to be more intensive to begin with, and then we kind of taper off a bit? Are we as sort of managers of this process, as the folks within the company who are overseeing it, do we have a process whereby we are not, right there looming over someone's shoulder, but always checking in, saying, hey, Kim, how's it going with, I know you've been working with Dorinda. How has that been working out for you? And Dorinda, I know that we just teamed you up with this great mentor we have, Kim. How are you liking that? How's it going? Some check-in so that we know this is not just a set it and forget it kind of operation we have here. And of course, we need to know, and we're going to talk, well, not we, Dr. Harris is going to talk quite a bit about how we evaluate these programs, which is so important. But we need to know that. We need to know the strengths, the weaknesses of the program itself, the strengths and weaknesses of giving it relationships within it, and again, how that all reflects back to what are those 4 fundamental goals. What is our and as super smart folks like Dr. Harris talk about, what is our theory of change here? What are we thinking that we want our outcome to be, and what are the steps that we can rationally say, okay, if we do A, B, C, and D, well, E is going to result, and we need to see all that written out. And we can jump to the next slide, Dorinda, please. So this starts with this entire, of course, when we're talking about mentorship, this begins with the matching process. And we have to ask, again, related to our goals, we have to ask ourselves a number of questions about what that actually looks like. And there are no right or wrong answers to this necessarily, and there's nothing saying that the answers might not be different depending on who we're talking to. But under what aspects of a person's life are we making these mentorship matches based on? Is it all about Gen Z? Are we also thinking about veteran status? Are we thinking about disability? Are we thinking about just any aspect of someone's background, their identity? Have they had experience? Are they in reentry? Have they had experience with the Justice Department, or not the department, the justice system? Excuse me. All those aspects. We just want to know: are we looking for ways to? Which of those factors are we considering when we're making our match? But then we have to ask the question: okay, well, we want to think about veteran status or Gen Z status or what have you. Well, then that begs the question: are we matching Gen Zs with other Gen Z folks who've been in the company for a couple of years and been successful as kind of like, hey, we really are peers in this regard, and I'm going to help bring you along in this process? Or are we matching Gen Z with non-Gen Z folks so as to build those connections, so as to give someone a perspective that's outside their own? There's no right or wrong answer. If we're talking about veterans, you don't say, oh, you have to match veterans with veterans or you're doing it all wrong. Of course not. And it might be one individual veteran may be very interested in working with another veteran just because they want that comfort and want someone to say, yes, we have this shared experience. And another might say, well, no, I already know what it's. I already have all kinds of veteran buddies. I can go talk to them anytime. I want to talk to someone like Cori, who didn't serve in the military, but now can guide me because while I was in the military, he's been doing this corporate thing. So he can kind of guide me into this. So again, this roots back to the goals of this process and, of course, to the individual goals that any given employee, any given person is going to have in this process. So there's a million questions we can ask. None of them has a right or wrong answer, but these are the kinds of things. And it mostly comes down to why are we pairing folks together based on their goals, based on the goals of our project, and based on these aspects of folks' experiences. And then this moves into goal setting. And we have two major categories here. Goals that are about doing goals, do goals, and goals that are about being. So we can jump right to the next slide, please, Dorinda. Now, these are, as the name suggests, these are the pretty clear delineation here. Some aspects of mentorship are going to be about teaching particular skills, whether those are quote unquote hard skills, technical skills, or quote unquote soft skills. I say quote unquote because as someone who is not the most socially able person, I don't consider soft skills soft. I don't consider that's not easy for me. I don't think that's easy for most of us. And it's not just like, oh, can we get along in the office? It's much more than that. It's much more complicated. But that's what we're talking about when we're talking about do goals, and these are probably going to be shorter term goals. As a Gen Z person, obviously I'm not. If you can't see the gray, I'm not actually representing Gen Z here, but as a Gen Z person, am I What skills do I need to build in terms of how I manage my role in this office, how I manage my role in this organization, should be pretty observable. We should know when, okay, we've brought Cori to the point of having these skills. Should be pretty easy to measure. Should be something that we can say pretty clearly whether we have succeeded or have not yet succeeded in meeting one of these goals. Great thing about mentorship, we don't have to say, did we succeed or fail? We just have to ask, did we succeed yet? Because there's going to be, if we haven't succeeded yet, there's still more to go. And again, this is likely going to relate to very specific career-related outcomes. Now, our being goals, this is a little more complicated, right? This is about who we are and how we interact to the overall idea of working and to the organizations that we work with. So this is much less tangible. This is much more large scale. This is related to, if we're aware of the concept of the whole person, right? Whenever we go to work, it's not just work Cori that goes to work. It's the whole thing. It's the entire Cori experience that Cori is dragging around with him when he goes to work. Believe me, he would like to leave some of it at home in a box under the desk. Not the way it works. We are always our entire selves, and that is our hobbies. That's our interests. That's our fears. That's our anxieties. That's our love. That's our hope. Everything. It's all of us. So how are we relating this process back to that entire person and their goals? Of course, this is going to take more steps to measure or take more steps to cultivate. It's going to take more steps to measure this. It's going to be a harder, less tangible thing to measure. But part of the reason we do something like mentorship versus having an online instruction manual or something like that. An online instruction manual is going to be great for certain things. We might be able to accomplish a lot of goals with an online instruction manual, but we're not. What we like about mentorship, what's great about mentorship, is that there's so much of it that's not precisely defined. It's organic. It's a relationship, right? So because of that, that gives us the opportunity to really explore some of these different pieces and to look again at the whole person. And when, just as Dorinda was telling us, when we're thinking about Gen Z, if we are not thinking about the whole person, we can be, first of all, guaranteed that we're sure they are, as we all are, but not only are Gen Z thinking about the whole person, their whole lives, they're also going to be willing to talk about it and insist on certain things and advocate for themselves about certain aspects of that. That's great, I think. Coming from a generation where we didn't always think we could speak up, to me, that seems like a pretty good step. That seems like a great step forward. But that also means we need to be thinking in that kind of comprehensive way. You can jump right to the next slide, please. So this then brings us, and we keep talking about these goals, right? So when we are at the point of we've made our match, we've got a sense of what someone is looking to accomplish through this individual mentorship that they have. So we know what Cori's the mentee. We know what he wants to get out of this. Kim is going to be the mentor. We know what Kim's perspective is in this. We also know what our entire, what we hope will be accomplished by the fact that we've got mentorships going at all. We hope that Kim and Cori are going to have a stronger connection. They're going to understand each other better. Or maybe that's not one of our, it doesn't really matter. But we've got all those pieces in place. So now we need to kind of put some structure around this thing. What is this relationship going to be all about? However, we can't do that so tightly, so precisely that we give it no more room to grow. Again, relationship, organic. We are hoping that we're planting a seed, providing some care to it, providing some structure to it, not just throwing the seed in the yard and hoping, right? We're putting things together in a way that's going to allow this relationship to flourish. But I don't plant a seed and say, well, I'm going to make sure this plant only grows a foot tall. No, I want the plant to just grow. I want it to do that on its own and find its space and its way to do that as it wants to. So we want to define things like how frequently do we expect people to be meeting. Probably much more precisely at first, maybe a little more intensely at first too, as we're building a relationship. I'm sure everyone on the line has that friend that because you just spent like 2 weeks together talking, then you don't see him for 2 years. Doesn't matter. You can come right back. But that early time spent, that early regularity, So we want that all those things defined. Ideally, we want the mentor and mentee defining those things. Are we meeting in person? Are we meeting virtually, as we said before? Are we doing a little bit of a mix? Because while we recognize that Gen Z might be perfectly happy to do everything by Zoom, well, those of us who aren't, who have a distant memory of being a Gen Z equivalents, well, we think there's a real value in sitting down face to face. So maybe we're doing a little compromise, right? This again, relationship. This is all about that back and forth, and we want the mentor and mentee defining those things for themselves. And of course, but we're also again creating enough structure so that we have that room, again, like the potted plant that and has that room that we can that we can define this, but we're not limiting it right from the start. And then we can jump to the last slide, to what is my last slide, rather, I believe. So, and then all of this we are articulating back for all this that yes, we want flexibility. Yes, we want organic. Yes, we want this growing in whatever direction it wants to grow in. That having been said, we're also writing things down, right? Everyone involved is going to know what the program's expectations are, what the goals are, what the why on the programmatic level. Everyone's going to know what Cori, the mentee, wants to get out of this relationship, thinks about this relationship, hopes for this relationship. Everybody's going to know what Kim, the mentor, hopes for out of this relationship, was worried about in this relationship, all those pieces. Everyone knows how long we expect this is going to go for sure. Like, is it going to be a 6 months? Is it going to be a year? Is it going to be shorter, longer? Of course, with those things, we do not make people sign a pledge that after 1 year, okay, Kim and Cori, you can never speak again. Obviously, we are letting those if Kim and Cori keep wanting to talk after a year, and if it really were Kim and Cori would certainly want to keep talking. Hopefully, Kim would as well. We would want to let that relationship go, of course. And of course, we're precisely defining how we're making our means of contact, under what circumstances, maybe even giving the whys. If we're bouncing back and forth between a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting, to meeting in the park or to meeting over lunch at the cafe and at work, whatever it is, we're giving the reasons why, and we're seeing how all these different pieces interrelate, how it all makes sense together. And of course, all of that is going to also fuel this process of understanding, are we meeting the goals that we set out to meet individually, programmatically? As we ask these questions of ourselves that we ask right from day one, right? We don't start the evaluation 6 months after we won't start thinking about evaluation 6 months after we start thinking about mentorship. We start thinking about it that first day, which is why I believe, if we can jump to the next slide, the time has come to hand things over to Dr. Kim Harris, who actually is my mentor in many ways as I think about it.
You know what? That is a bi-directional relationship in terms of mentorship there, Cori. Thank you so much. And, I really appreciate, this. I love how we've structured this conversation, because I think what it epitomizes is the importance of combining intentionality with strategy as it pertains to an effective program of any type. Right. And as we're thinking about the mentor relationship, the mentor-mentee relationship, I think about this conversation that Cori and I have had a lot, and just thinking about this from a process standpoint, what we say at EDUCA Consulting, and it's very similar to what I know Cori, says and believes in at Aperio Consulting, is this notion of any good program and process is grounded in the question of the who, the what, the why, and the how. Right. And I love that, because as we think about the who in this case, Dorinda has laid out, that's the Gen Z demographic, with all of their characteristics, with all of the things that really make them a generation, all the things that they've collectively experienced, expectations, how they've come to know and be and enter into the workplace. And that what in and of itself being this conversation, dealing with the what of mentorship, right? And then the why. Why are we doing this? Why does this matter? Well, we want to attract and we want to retain and grow a competitive workforce that Gen Zers will be a part of. We want them to thrive in that space. And now we've come to more of the intentional how. And that is where program evaluation comes into place. And at EDUCA Consulting, that's what we do a lot of, is program evaluation. And Dorinda, could you advance to the next slide? Thank you so much. So in thinking about program evaluation, I love what Cori stressed and what he emphasized is that when we think of timing and how these things happen, and that lovely term that he used around theory of change and theories of action, what we're talking about is the how, connecting that how, which is that evaluation piece, to the why. We talked about, we want this thriving workplace. Well, how do we get there? How do we make sure that the goals that we've set, the needs that we've identified, the aims that we're looking to achieve, how do we ensure that it's not a happenstance process? Because we know in the place of that in the workplace, happenstance can cost us seriously in terms of financial capital, human capital, and all the things. We want to make sure that we have a roadmap to success. And that is where that evaluation piece comes in. So when we think about evaluation, what we're doing is, as thought partners in the process, alongside our employer partners and also the mentor and mentees, we are thinking about how do we define the things that all stakeholders have identified are the things of value and that matter in this process. So basically, how do we define success? If we're talking about productivity, well, let's get concrete on that. What does that look like? If we're talking about increasing revenue, let's get specific. By how much and what are those timetables? Any of the things, right, in that universe of metrics are things that we can and we will and we should, in a good evaluation, be thinking about. And when we think about connecting a good mentor program or mentorship program to those organizational outcomes, as Cori said, it's really essential that we really start at ground one alongside the conceptualization of the program. So what is this mentorship program for? What are the things that we are highlighting and prioritizing? How do we want this to be structured? Will this be a typical, kind of a one-to-one, more traditional mentorship program? Or will it be one that makes more sense to be rounded out with several mentors, career mentors, near-peer mentors, different mentors for different circumstances? Those are conversations and questions that we will co-create the answers with alongside all of the other stakeholders. So when we think super quickly about what are the essential components of good program evaluation, it really needs to reflect the program design. So these conversations should start early. These conversations should happen frequently. And these conversations ultimately should cultivate and yield a sense of trust so that the evaluation team, the mentors, the mentees, and the employer partners should really feel safe and able to share their vulnerabilities, share their wins, share their challenges, because also essential to good evaluation is useful and actionable learning. Dorinda, could you advance to the next slide? So in service to that, we also know that evaluation should explore some specific program elements in light of their purpose in the overall program, right? So if we're thinking about what are the objectives of this mentorship program, then let's sit down as the evaluation team, as the stakeholders who have informed or who will be or should be informing the mentor program or the mentorship program. What are those key things that need to be expressly stated, need to be articulated? How are we going to define them, right? And do we collectively agree on what those metrics are, when we've met them, if we've missed the mark, and also too, even in missing those marks, because we know it's never a linear path, but we want to get it as close to linear as we can in terms of knowing that we're on our path to meeting those goals and being able to say that we have been able to accomplish these things. But even when we miss that mark, what are the learnings, right? What have we learned we should really double down on? What have we learned that we really should really tweak? What have we learned that we may need to trim off or reimagine or rethink? And how efficiently can we get those things? And should we do those things? Could we go to the next slide? Thank you so much. So kind of grounding and thinking about this a particular example here, thinking about the goals and the purposes of the mentorship experience. In this particular example, the question of, does the mentorship initiative, is it designed to increase the classroom success and resiliency? And does that correlate to an improvement in grade and student retention and passing rates? So let's say that if this were the question that we were seeking to answer, and we could easily change out these things and replace them with things that are more, let's say, on the job specific. So maybe it would be a question of, does this mentorship initiative increase employee engagement and retention and reduce the amount of turnover? Does it increase productivity? And does it increase, let's say, earnings or whatever these metrics are? We start with a question that's informed by the experience. In this case, the experience of place and space. Classroom place and space, shop floor place and space, or whatever the organizational place and spaces are. We want to start there. We want to make sure that we have a sense of what are the places, what are the areas of urgency, what are the things that we're really looking to learn more about, what are the things that we're really looking to leverage, what answers are we trying to or what questions are we trying to answer? What problems are we trying to solve? And sitting down and starting from that early of a process to think through what are the questions, the evaluation questions that we want to craft, that we want to co-create based upon what we're hearing from the stakeholders. So if we're talking about a mentorship experience, the potential mentees, the potential mentors, the other key stakeholders within the employer environment. What are the questions? What are the things? What is the purpose of this mentorship? Do we need to be thinking about, how do we onboard Gen Zers into, let's say, a traditional, or what we would maybe tend to think of as a traditional workplace, where maybe the average age prior to Gen Zers may be 50 or 47 or whatever the case may be. How do we effectively and successfully integrate and onboard them into these spaces where we can leverage who they are and what they bring, where there can be some cross-pollination and knowledge sharing, and the ultimate goal can be increased productivity and earnings for the organization. We sit down that specifically and that granularly to tease apart that question and say, okay, how are we going to define a successful onboarding experience? What timelines and time horizons do we need to be thinking about? What will the mile markers of success look like? Those are the things that we definitely want to be thinking about. Could you advance to the next slide? Thank you so much. So these are just some more examples that we've lifted up in terms of how program design and program evaluation should be aligned. When we're thinking about the what, and we're thinking about the who, and we're thinking about all of those questions, those pertinent questions, we also have to think about that how, and just to emphasize that. So one of the key points or key processes in that how is to make sure that as we're conceptualizing this mentorship program, who will be the target audience, if we're talking about Gen Zers, or if we're talking about veterans, or if we're talking about some other population group, maybe some of those identities overlap or intersect. then how do we tease out a program? How do we craft a program that will enable us to successfully orient, onboard this potential aspect of the workforce into our organization and have a high-performing, productive organization? So as we're thinking about the program design piece, we should also be thinking about that program evaluation piece. And oftentimes where we start with that, we start with candid conversations, information sharing, oftentimes what we call these opportunities to basically gain wisdom through the voices of the folks who will be impacted most by this work. So we're talking about stakeholders on site, employers, employees, folks who could potentially be mentors, folks who could potentially be mentees, particularly if we're thinking about how do we tap into thinking about the totality of the staff or the workforce within our respective organizations, who within that particular pool of potential candidates could we tap into and say, hey, I've seen you. You have some curiosity, some potential. You've expressed some interest. Would you be interested in being a mentor? Have you considered a career change or leveraging your talents in some other ways? So it really does require us to be thoughtful, to really engage in ongoing conversation and utilize and leverage every opportunity that we interact and engage as an opportunity to process the data, the gems, the jewels that different stakeholders will be sharing with us through conversation. We factor those things in and we walk alongside the employer partner, potential mentees and mentors to really co-create a plan of action that really is in service to the program that we are fleshing out and co-creating and designing. Could we advance to the next slide? So once again, just another example of another potential scenario, and also the imperative, how important it is that as we think about all of the ways, right, that individuals who could be amazing candidates as mentors or mentees enter into the space, as Cori said, we have to acknowledge, see, and be willing to commit to the totality of who they are, right? Because we don't segment those things off, we don't partition those things, we bring all of that in. And not to say that the perfect program or the perfect evaluation is one that can anticipate every potential nuanced thing, but it is one that should be designed in such a way that it can be responsive to things that we really couldn't see on the horizon, because sometimes you just don't know until you know. But if we think about the value of crafting an evaluation component that really is reflective of and respective of and respectful of, I should say, the aims, the goals of the mentorship program, we create space to respond to and to be responsive to the things that will bubble up, because we know that they will. So when we're thinking about that program evaluation component, which is like the lifeblood of the how, we really have to think about, engaging with early, engaging with often, and cultivating space for really safe conversation, but enriching conversation that enables us to leverage that to then ensure that we are creating checkpoints, we are creating a monitoring approach, we are creating measurement and assessment tools that will be in service to the organization long after the evaluator is gone. Actually, what we're really doing, we are creating many evaluators within the organization who can carry on the mission of these aims even after our tenure with the client partner has ended. I think we're almost at the end, but could we advance to the next slide? And indeed we were. And so with that being said, just a little snippet of basically that who, that what, that how, and how all of those things come in service together to really help to inform highly productive organizations. So with that, thank you, and we'll open the floor for questions.
Hi, this is Mark Scott with WSU Tech in Wichita, Kansas. My question, and I think maybe it's centered towards Dorinda, but how can we, as educators at a technical college, better understand, support the unique perspectives of Gen Z, especially around terms like inclusion, that can probably put us in the crosshairs in this politically charged climate that we live in? I mean, I want to figure out a way to balance our institutional values, keep the students at center, and still maintain strong relationships with their industry and community partners, and not get caught in the crosshairs.
Well, I think that that's a great question, and certainly want Kim and Cori to weigh in. But I think part of this starts with understanding, as you indicated, where Gen Z is, what are their priorities? And certainly I have seen lots of great opportunity come out of focus groups with them. What are they really looking for? Example, I talked to an organization this week that was kind of frustrated by some of their organizational climate survey results with things like respect. And I said, well, do you understand what that means to your people? Because that's a very innocuous term. And they felt that they didn't. And I said, well, have you sat down with your people to understand what that term means? My point is, we can't assume that we know what a particular word means. We have to ask, and we have to start to understand that. So I think having those conversations is important. I think when it comes to employers in the community, what I'm finding is that a lot of them do not understand this generation at all. So we're going to help them kind of build capacity. We're going to have to brainstorm with them. We're going to have to be a thought partner with them. And we're going to help them understand a little better where this generation is coming from, where they want to go, and kind of how to meet in the middle. What are some of those recommendations to, really be successful? But again, I think it starts with really defining what those values that Gen Z espouses, what does that really mean to them? And really understanding that it's not just a word, but what does that look like for them? Kim and Cori, anything to add?
I can't see Cori, so I don't know if he's chiming in, but Cori, if you're okay with me jumping in, and then I will
Go ahead.
definitely. Oh, absolutely. And then I'll definitely hold silent. I know you have some gems to share. I would say yes, with amplification to everything that Dorinda has said. And I'd also say that, having also come from that community college space as well, that the one thing that, I would always have conversations with my college president about was the fact, and he was a firm believer in that, was the fact that the students are our clients, right? The students are our clients. So to the point that Dorinda makes, number one, level setting on taking that time to understand what their wants are and what their needs are, and and us being a mission, us, I'm thinking now that the community college, because I still consider myself part of that world, us being a mission-driven institution, there are some things that we are mission to provide. So understanding that nuance, that there are some things that may be a little bit different, or even a lot bit different in terms of what, the Gen Zers want, based upon, who they are, and how they've come to be in this day and age. To the extent, and I think there's always the argument that can be made that, it just makes good business sense to be aware of what their needs are and who they are, and then to, in as much as possible, given the fact that, we're a mission-driven institution, be responsive to those needs, right? And oftentimes I say, whatever the words are, whatever the issues are, right, that may be, and, because political climates change, epoch to epoch, but thinking about the fact that our underlying mission is to be responsive and meet, students where they are. And if we're talking about students who are Gen Zers and want to really connect their professional and their academic and their personal, they really don't want a lot of hard lines and divisions there. How are we best suited to be responsive to that without changing our mission, right? Because some of that is it just may be, hey, this goes beyond what we're capable of doing, what we're missioned to do, but to the extent that we have, that ability, and community colleges, being these amazing institutions, have a lot of ability there, because we are truly nested in community to be able to rise to that occasion. Because I think what that just shows, and what it and what it signals, is that we care about you as a person, and we care about you as a client base. And I'll hand it over to Cori.
Yeah, and I can be very brief because there's so much great information there. I would just highlight the aspect of if we have questions about Gen Z in our workplace, the first place we should go is to the Gen Z folks in our workplace. If we are trying to demonstrate our respect for them, well, so many of these words that as you mentioned, maybe are we're struggling with it a bit now, really come down to questions like, do I have a voice? Do I have a place at the table? Do I have a sense of agency? Like, okay, no, I just got hired 2 weeks ago. I don't expect to be the CEO. I don't expect to tell everybody what they're going to do. But I'm now a member of this organization, right? So do I have a degree of gravity, a degree of pull as a consequence of that? And I think with Gen Z particularly, we might say, if I said, you know what, we're going to put together a veteran affinity group, and they're going to really be a leadership voice, and they're going to help us, move in a certain direction, we wouldn't think twice. Of course, that's great. That's a great idea. With Gen Z, we so often think, and this is, I think, a mistake that I know I certainly instinctively make. I don't always go directly to, well, these have got to be leaders too. But the one thing we do know, as Dorinda was clearly explaining, is that Gen Z is going to be very much ready for that kind of role. That they're much more expecting that than we are necessarily expecting to allow for that. So I think it's a great. It kind of answers all our problems at once when we put folks in the driver's seat, give them positions of having an ability to have influence, having a voice, all those kinds of great things. But that is my only add to that great information. Thank you for that question.
Cori, it looks like you've got a question, maybe Cori Adams. You're on mute, Cori. There you go.
Oh, there we go. Now you can hear me. Thank you so much. And Cori, I want to thank you for your service from one veteran to another. I think I think the mentorship is a very interesting piece. But my question, coming from someone, we're not a quote unquote educator, right? My name is, I work for Universal Robots as the education program manager. So some of the things that you're talking about around apprenticeships, around mentorships, and about engaging with Gen Zs, what kind of recommendations would you have for an industry partner to kind of engage in some of those different areas?
Well, I think that's a great question, Cori. I think that mentorship, and I'll just go first, Cori and Kim. Sorry, I just kind of jumped in there. But I think that one of the things we want to do as industry is be thinking about these same things. Gen Z in industry is also looking for mentoring and feedback, Cori. So I think how can you set up those programs and opportunities for people to learn from one another within your institution? That feedback is so critical. That place of safety is so critical for Gen Z. When you look at some of the things that they're looking for out of a workplace, they're looking for some of the things Cori and Kim were just talking about. They want that safety. Sometimes knowing that they have that mentor and that safe place that they can go when they have a question is really important. So I think setting that up. How is your feedback process working? What kind of mechanisms do you have in place for feedback? And I would encourage industry, really everyone, to be thinking about not just feedback in the sense of like, here's some things you need to work on constructively, but how do you catch people being good, if you will? Because Gen Z is really looking for a lot of that praise, and they're looking for that positive feedback. So how are we giving people positive feedback, and what are we doing to incentivize them on the right behaviors, if you will? If we're seeing wrong behaviors, what does that process look like to help them understand what right looks like and how they can possibly do better next time? And I think part of that starts with also, Cori Adams, training and making sure that your mentors, your leadership team within industry has the skill set to give that appropriate feedback. Cori, Kim, and I talk about that a lot because we find that's a challenge. We have mentors who are selected maybe because they're very knowledgeable, let's say, about the technical aspects of the job. What they're not so knowledgeable about is the interpersonal pieces. And, how do I sit down? And, Cori and Kim and I are struggling over here because, Cori's not pulling his weight. How are Kim and I going to have that conversation with him? Or, Dorinda's not pulling her weight. How are Cori and Kim going to have that conversation? Folks are missing those skills of how to give that feedback, both positively and negatively / constructively, if you will. So I think in industry, some of the same principles there as far as giving feedback and structuring those programs and trying to create those safe atmospheres are really important. And Cori and Kim, do you have anything to add?
I'm going to jump in first on this one, and I don't really have anything to add to that. I think that just perfectly summarizes. I just wanted to clarify one thing. I talk about veterans a lot because I have the privilege of working with veterans quite a bit. I myself am not a
Ah,
veteran, so it's simply mine to say thank you, and thank you for the privilege of serving you and others and other veterans. But just wanted to make that very clear. I of course don't want any mistakes there. So, of
not a problem. Thanks, Cori.
course.
Well, I'll just jump in super quickly. I want to be a good steward of time. Definitely, yes, thank you. And also to say to that question, Cori, I think about all of the things that Dorinda lifted up in addition to, thinking about too, all of that weight doesn't have to fall. I mean, it's not a weight in a negative way, but I would say also to do like your own landscape scan, if you will. Think about who could be community partners who have cultivated and have those authentic relationships with Gen Zers who either deepening the relationships that you may have with some of them or establishing them could help. Those relationships could help in a multitude of ways, not to mention one of those ways being able to work more effectively with Gen Zers, right? So understanding kind of, the community actors, whether they're faith-based or whether they're education or some other, entity within community that may already have, cultivated some of that ground with Gen Zers and tapping into that vein, right? So that you can then be able to, and it also helps to round out your understanding if you have some understanding or really begin to develop some authentic understanding and engagement with Gen Zers as well.
Oh, perfect. Well, I appreciate your time today. I thought it was a great webinar, and thank you to Craig and the NCATC for putting this together. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And Craig, before we get back over to you, because I know you have probably some things to close us out, just quickly, I did put in the chat, everyone. Kim and Cori on our team have created some amazing resources on our Supply Chain Automation Workforce Hub. So if you're interested in learning more about mentoring, we do have some resources available there under our sponsor resources area. There's, I know, a couple of web videos. We also have some fact sheets there that we've created. So there is more. And of course, if you have further questions, you are certainly welcome to contact us. I know Craig is going to be getting these slides out, and I believe on this final slide, we do have our contact information. It's all there. So Craig, back to you.
Thanks, Cori, Kimberly, and Dorinda so much. I think we could go on for another half an hour at least with questions and answers. I want to share one thing, kind of back to Cori Adams' question. I was privileged to be part of a Defense Department community college in Ohio TechNet industry thing yesterday, and they had a whole panel on two students, not just one, that came from a program, and they were mentored by the faculty and the industry equally in the classroom, in the labs, during their entire time getting their micro credentials in MEMS, and another one in welding. And the one gentleman, who was a few years older than the younger lady, Gen Z, by the way, was hired by the one company that came in and mentored them. And then he became a supervisor and hired the younger person that was also on the panel. It was like a triple, home run. So I just wanted to say, if we can get a video of that, we'll post it on our website, because that was a great 20-minute session that I was able to see. And it was right there in the heart of what the answer is to Cori and what you already said. It's like employers and educators need to get continually closer together in the classroom, in their organizations, and anywhere in between, so that they can have a view of the students and the students can have a view of them. And it's not a black box, especially in manufacturing, construction, other fields where you're not seeing that every day, like banking and other things. So I just want to say, the more employers can be involved in the real world of the education process, the better. So I will close this out by saying I appreciate everybody's time. I'm going to put in the chat one little Wall Street Journal article that I saw just this month about how Gen Z is becoming the tool belt generation, which I thought was another really good article to shine a light and amplify some of the opportunities for us to leverage in our work toward attracting more Gen Zs into our career fields that we're trying to do. And that's there for your use as well. And I think there's some good facts in that. But Dorinda, Kimberly and Cori, thank you so much for your expertise and your time today.
You.
Thank everyone today for attending, and this will be posted on our website early next week. Any final thoughts, Dorinda?
I don't think so. Just if you have additional questions, please reach out to us. We would be more than happy to try to help you with this. And I think mentoring is just so crucial, whether your industry, whether your education, whatever your sector is these days, it's what Gen Z is looking for. So how do we capitalize on some of those great mentors that we have right within our organizations and create programs that are going to help us be successful at retaining and better building the talents of this next generation?
Great. Thank you again. We'll definitely keep this at a top level topic going forward, and we'll hopefully have you back again. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody.
You all very much.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Craig.
It was great.